Today's guest is someone tackling one of the most complex and often invisible parts of the aviation operation. Anne-Marie Pellerin is the CEO of Curie Technologies, a company focused on bringing clarity, control, and intelligence to baggage and operational data. With a background that blends deep technical expertise and real operational understanding, Anne-Marie is helping airlines and airports move away from fragmented systems and towards something far more connected, responsive, and usable. We are going to get into what that actually looks like on the ground, why data in aviation is so underutilized, and what needs to change if we want baggage to finally work the way passengers expect it to. So welcome to today's episode of the BagFather. Welcome, Anne-Marie. Live from Paris.
Thank you, Marlon. It's great to be here.
Thank you. I'm here with Jen, of course, and as a team, we will basically roast you today. Now, setting aside the jokes, I think it's an extremely interesting topic today because our industry, aviation in general, but baggage specifically, is not really short of data. It's short of usable data, right?
Exactly, yes.
And we're going to talk about that. But maybe for the listeners, a little bit about your background. And I know you have done your stint in the US, so please talk about it.
Yes, thanks, Marlon. Thanks, Jen. My name is Anne-Marie Pellerin. I am CEO of Curie Technologies. I actually started in the aviation sector with the Transportation Security Administration in the United States. I was their head of innovation back in 2007 and worked under Kip Hawley, who was the administrator at the time, to roll out some new and innovative technologies in U.S. airports, including for cabin baggage screening in some of the airports with the multi-view X-rays that were deployed. I then came overseas to be a Department of Homeland Security TSA attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Paris, France for 6 years. And then I left that position in 2014 to stand up a small advisory firm called LAMLA in Europe. We also have an office in Washington, D.C., working in aviation security with a lot of the operators, so airlines and airports and cargo operators, as well as technology companies that were bringing new solutions to bear. And so in that space and working very closely with all the OEMs, but also with all of the airports, I identified a need, which is why I built Curie Technologies with my co-founders, Christina and Florian, who are based in Innsbruck, Austria, about almost 4 years ago now. When I started wandering around different airports around the world, actually, you have frontline security officers and managers and supervisors who are using all of this complex equipment to screen bags, both at the checkpoint and in whole baggage rooms. And they are still using a lot of pen and paper related to doing regular preventative maintenance or tasks for the equipment. So they have to do tests and calibrations on all of the equipment that's deployed in a checkpoint or a whole baggage room before they can open the checkpoint or open the whole baggage room. And all of those tests and calibrations are in pen and paper. And so we got to a point where I was like, airports are spending millions of dollars on these systems, and industry is spending millions of dollars on, making these new high-grade detection capabilities. Why are we still using pen and paper? So we built Curie Technologies on the one hand, and this is one piece of it, to digitize all of those frontline workflows related to equipment and compliance and ensuring that they're being taken care of appropriately. Okay, so you have the operators who are doing all of this stuff to the equipment. On the other hand, you have all these service providers who are external to the airport who have to come in and service equipment, and they're also doing all of this stuff related to the equipment. There are multiple different service providers. So for any given airport, for all of the aviation security equipment that's there, maybe there are like 5 different ones that have to come in and service, right? And they all are in their own software. They all have their own processes, and it's completely disjointed. So here you have the front line who's using pen and paper. You have all the service providers who are in their own separate systems and portals. And then you have the ops center in an airport who's kind of in between and in their own software that's also not connected to everybody else. So we realized that all of these different stakeholders and component parts need to be connected. And so we created Curie, our software platform, as a complement to bring those parties together to common workflows and kind of like a system of record in terms of what do we have in this environment, what's working and not working, how long has it not been working and what's the issue, when's the last time somebody came in and fixed it, what is the service provider doing currently, and how do you automate all of that so that everybody has the right record in their system and everybody knows exactly what's happening at any given point in time.
Yeah, I think that automation is certainly moving forward, but they are all disparate systems. So we hear from our clients often like, don't give me more data. I don't know what to do with more data. And in reality, it's not that they have too much data. They just don't have the right data at the right time.
Exactly. That's totally.
And what's interesting to me is that's a very interesting aspect. But the other aspect is the cybersecurity threat of it. Is everything updated? I recently was at a location that the last update was performed in 2022. How do you deal with that? How do you keep track on that?
Yeah, especially when it's in different systems to that point earlier, right? So I'll give you an example of that. We were onboarding an airport not too long ago where I was down kind of on my hands and knees tagging with one of our NFC tags, an X-ray system.
So let's get the elephant out of the room here. Which airport are we talking about?
I'm not going to tell you based on what I'm about to tell you.
I figured that.
Secret.
Yeah. So one of the X-rays had not had the radiation check that was supposed to be done was a year overdue, right? And that's not because people didn't want to do it or spend the money. It's really because the record of that was somewhere with an OEM. And that OEM didn't have some sort of an alert for the frontline technician that they needed to go on site for this particular customer and perform that function. And the owner of the equipment didn't have something flagging for them that needed to happen, right? So there are all these different cooks in the kitchen, and you don't have a way to put together the pieces and basically in a very simplistic manner say, this is your task list today or this week or this month for the entire community so that everybody's on the same page in terms of what needs to happen. And so that's really what we've tried to do is going back to data obesity, tried to take all of that data and all those disparate systems and all those technical details and really make it super straightforward in terms of what do you have, what's working and not working, what needs to happen today, next week, the following month, right? And has it happened? And are we compliant? And is everybody doing what they need to do? And so if you can automate all of that as much as possible and make it really easy to understand and digest and act on, then everybody in that community wins. And they don't have to rip and replace their really expensive softwares that they've already spent years trying to kind of fill with good data, right? The goal is really just to pull those different data sets together.
So far, what it sounds like to me that we're talking about is mostly the upkeep of systems. So not so much of the operational data. Is that something that Curie Technologies is also addressing?
So we're looking at the operational data too. And we've been drawn into this, which has really been an interesting journey because we started very much on the frontline workflows. And we talked a lot to the OEMs who build systems because when an officer goes to, let's say, an X-ray and the X-ray is broken, and they want to troubleshoot on the X-ray, I probably don't know how they should troubleshoot. The airport probably doesn't know how they should troubleshoot. The OEM knows how they should troubleshoot, right? So we went...
And they charge you.
Well, we went to the OEMs and we said, so like, if somebody does a good job troubleshooting, your technicians don't have to come. So help us understand, in your view, what should the frontline technician be doing to troubleshoot?
But quite honestly, there are not that many OEMs in this field. It's an overseeable...
Totally.
Is this a sort of monopoly kind of thing?
It's a monopoly, but there's enough.
But 4 or 5 parties.
There's probably a little bit more than that. Let's say there's 10 big parties, right, in aviation.
Okay.
And so if you go and you talk to all of those 10, which was what we've tried to do, and you get their troubleshooting guides and you get their failure codes and you load them to our backend for the frontline workforce, which is what we've tried to do, they win. They win because they get less service calls, right? Or if they get a service call, they get a better service call. And so we've gone and we've talked to those OEMs. We've tried to understand the troubleshooting. We've tried to understand the failure codes. We've tried to understand when they get a ticket on a broken system, what do they want in that ticket? How does it align with their maintenance management software? In some instances, we've integrated with their maintenance management software through an API. And so we really believe in working with them. But what that's drawn us towards actually is, hey, Anne-Marie, we've already integrated our maintenance management software. What if we also deliver through Curie Analytics? That's a great idea. Why is that a great idea? Because right now, with those 10 different OEMs, they probably have 10 different analytics capabilities, right? But if you're an airport, you don't want to open 10 different portals to see 10 different analytics capabilities. What you want is one. So if all of those OEMs can deliver their capabilities and services through common infrastructure, the customer gets what they want. They remain protective in their own tenant with their own data, right? And you don't need an integrator to come in and try to pull it all together. And so those are kind of the conversations that we've been having now, back to your point, Jen, about analytics, which is, okay, if everybody wants to network their systems and deliver analytics to the customers vis-a-vis how am I doing on service delivery? What's my availability rating of the equipment? What's my response time on tickets, right? How do you automate all of that reporting so that each OEM only sees their data, but the customer sees everything in their footprint? And that's really the conversation that we're having right now with a lot of the OEMs that's been really impactful and we're really excited about. Another reason why we're really excited about that, if you look at AI and where it's going, is a lot of people will go to an airport now and be like, I'm going to solve all your problems because I'm going to come in and I'm going to look at all your data and I'm going to run AI and it's going to be magnificent. The problem with that is when I think about equipment, one airport doesn't have enough information on their equipment and footprint to do anything highly valuable. But you know what? The OEMs do. They have a footprint like around the entire world of tons and tons of equipment, and they have all that data in their CMMS. So isn't it better potentially for those OEMs to actually derive a predictive maintenance algorithm for their equipment base, but deliver that algo on their equipment through common infrastructure? So again, I go back to I think the way that we're seeing things in the future is for Curie, if we can become between the frontline workforce, ops in an airport, and the vendors, a common infrastructure for delivery of what we call service governance and analytics, then you don't need middlemen anymore. And what you actually have is OEMs who are able to deliver better and airports who have better solutions at the end of the day without kind of third parties coming in and trying to claim data from both sides and develop something off of it.
It sounds completely logical to me. Why wasn't this solved before?
So I don't know. I think that one of the big problems in the past has been everybody likes to do it themselves, right? And I've run up against that conversation with some of the OEMs already. So if you go to an OEM and you say, you know what, I think that you should deliver analytics, or I think you should integrate with your CMMS with our platform and your customers, they're going to say, don't worry, we'll do that by ourselves. We have a software team. And my point to them has been, that's great. That's great. You have a software team, but you can't do this because you're an OEM. There needs to be a neutral intermediary in the middle to do this that everybody trusts. And so you asked me, there's only 10 people in this market. Yeah, there's only 10 people in this market. That's a good thing when you're trying to build common infrastructure as a trusted third-party intermediary, right?
Again and again, Jen, how many podcasts did we record where it's all about collaboration and the willingness to collaborate?
It really
This is a repeating feedback that we are getting all the time. And I can imagine in your case, many airports also have multiple vendors, which makes it even worse. So yeah, I totally
think
get
it's
it.
also, Marlon, why now? Like, why did not any? So where the argument is becoming more and more compelling now, honestly, I think with the OEMs, is that you are starting to see some of the hyperscalers come into the airports and say, don't worry about it. I'm going to take all your data and I'm going to tell you all the service that you should cut. And that's happening. And I think the OEMs see that happening. They're like, wait a second, we're going to be completely commoditized and nobody's going to pay for our service. And we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars investing in R&D and product certification on our entire footprint. What gives? And so my point to them would be like, okay, if you want to protect that, you have to give the customer what they want. And the customer wants a single view. The customer doesn't necessarily want a bunch of intermediaries, but you guys have all wanted to be in your own portal forever. So therefore, the intermediaries are winning. So if you find a way to buy into common infrastructure and to deliver, your customer wins and you win. And so I feel like because AI is taking hold and because you see some of the hyperscalers engaging, that's where the OEMs are starting to say, maybe there's something to this. And they're really starting to collaborate, which has been great.
Jen and I are trying to get AWS into our podcast. They are a little bit reluctant because we have some questions for them. But we most certainly will have them in our podcast soon. Interesting, because one of the big benefits that I also see is the real-time part of it, because otherwise you're always too late.
Exactly.
In reacting.
Absolutely. I mean, we have certain instances where the back and forth also on tickets and ticket latency, where something's broken on the front line, and between the time that the system breaks down and the officer actually being able to go to a computer or call somebody, that routing through the SOC and then going out to the vendor, that can be sometimes days, right? Because
and then you can miss what the real issue is when you're coming from behind instead of right in the middle of it. Maybe it's not so obvious what the true issue was that caused delays or downtime.
You have like a lot of issues that people should be noticing or ensuring are taken care of, but they just don't because it's not front of mind. So for example, like filters on trace detection units, right? They need to be cleaned on a regular basis. Who thinks of that? Who's working in a checkpoint? Nobody. But in our platform, they have like rugged tablets that they take out to do their testing and certification on the ETDs that ask them, there's a pop-up, have you checked the ETD filter, right? So small things like that, and it shows this like ugly, nasty ETD filter photo. Things like that really make people say, oh no, I haven't done that. But it has this kind of downstream effect because if you're preparing and arming the frontline workforce with digital workflows that they like to use, and it reminds them to do things like cleaning a filter, that system doesn't break down as much, and the OEM doesn't have to dispatch a service technician, and the system's going to last for longer, and you're going to have more availability in a checkpoint that works better. And so, that's where it starts. It starts in the front line. And so the maintenance management softwares that have been bought by airports are really for the internal maintenance team, which is cool. When things break, they go out and service it, what have you. But the people who are really like touching and doing all the preventative maintenance tasks and activities all the time that keep these systems going are the frontline workforce or like all the service providers. And like I said earlier, one's in pen and paper and the other's like, in disparate CMMS systems coming in.
I always thought that Jen was the true diva of baggage. That's what I always thought. But
you're going to displace me now, Anne-Marie?
No, absolutely not. But what Anne-Marie is also describing in some airports, and I know some of them, there's always this person or this king in his own kingdom, that keeps control of his environment, including all the equipment that he carefully selected. What I see not a replacement of workforce is something to make it more, I hate the term, but create it more cleverness, if you wish, because that kind of cleverness that we need to do it smarter is not always adopted by those little kings in their kingdom. So it was a little bridge from you as a Jen, as a diva, to the little divas that we have on certain airports fooling around with this equipment. But I guess I'm right, because on some airports, it's most of the time one or two persons that control the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right, I think, vis-a-vis the internal maintenance team. The difference that I've seen, Marlon, with security equipment is you can have a level 1 service team internally. You can have. But more often than not, you have to call the external service provider to come in and fix it. And that's where it's very unique, right? And so that kind of external community is very active in doing either preventative maintenance activities or corrective and coming in. That's one piece that's unique. The other piece that's really unique is historically, Airports and governments have been really reluctant to network aviation security equipment. They don't want to do it because the bad guys potentially could get into the equipment and do other stuff, right? And so a lot of the activities that in a traditional environment could be done through a network are not being done through a network. It's more manual, or somebody has to come in and gather that data, or the frontline workforce has to actually go to the machine. So those two things kind of create an environment for the aviation security equipment where the internal maintenance team of an airport is actually less involved. And so that's one piece. The other piece that we've seen is in environments where the actual airport owns all of the equipment, which is the case in the United States for aviation worker screening equipment, or in non-US airports like in Europe where the airport actually owns everything and not TSA, you have this dynamic where you might have 6 different service contracts for the 6 different types of equipment that you're using. And those 6 different service contracts, and when things break, there are 6 different workflows through your internal airport organization, like how they get fixed. So one might go to IT, and IT might try to fix it first and then call the vendor. One might go to facilities, and facilities will come in and like try to fix it, like your automated gates or whatever, and then maybe it'll go to vendor. One might go directly out to the vendor because nobody internally is allowed to touch it. So how do you automate all those workflows? Otherwise, you have somebody at your call center in the middle of the night when a system breaks down using tribal knowledge to figure out like, who should I call, or, how should this work?
I think it's all about reducing noise, confusion, and conflicting information, because that's ultimately what you get.
Well, and it's really the move away from management by crisis. So you're able to make better decisions based on a lot of good information coming in.
Exactly.
We should have one operational truth. That's what we need to have.
That's it. But that's like I always say kind of a system of record. But it really is that. So if you can create between the owner of the equipment and the external service providers of the equipment one system of record through common infrastructure, which is what we're trying to build, everybody wins, because you're not saying at the end of the month, oh, here's my list of response times. And the airport's like, you responded 10 minutes. And the other is saying, no, it took me 3 minutes. And you're comparing your 2 separate data sets. You don't even need to do that anymore.
Anne-Marie, I like the utopia that you're describing. I love it. But the reality is we are dealing with a heavy infrastructure mindset. And that's difficult on many, many airports. So how are you going to convince everybody, besides being in this fantastic podcast with Jen and me, so everybody who's listening, sign up for the podcast. But how are you going to do that? Because I can see this is not something you can do overnight. And tell me a little bit more about the success of Curie Technologies over the last 3 or 4 years.
So let me address your first question, which is, how are we going to do this?
I have many more.
We're starting with the frontline. And we always say that frontline first, right? So if we do our jobs correctly with the frontline, forget about all the OEM common infrastructure buy-in stuff, right? Then we will already have customers in airports, irrespective of whether OEMs decide to connect their CMMS. And we will also have happy OEMs, because if we digitize workflows for the frontline, which we're doing, and I'll tell you about in a minute, and those front lines are solid and they're OEM informed, then the OEMs are going to get better tickets. There's going to be less latency. They're going to drive down costs of delivery for service technicians, et cetera. And already everybody wins. And so that's what we are doing in a number of different locations. Our very first customer was the US Department of State. The State Department actually buys a lot of aviation security equipment, and they give it to foreign authorities as part of a capacity development initiative. And they actually bought a license to Curie Technologies, to Curie, our platform, for 11 airports overseas. And so the reason for that was they didn't want to just buy and get the technology. They wanted to give a platform to help that national authority and the airport operators actually support the front line in using those technologies and doing test and calibration and implementing a quality assurance program. And that's what we did. That was Curie Technologies. So that was our very first client, and a great one.
Sometimes it's a relatively new company, and the sales pitch, of course, is sometimes different than reality. And I know a little bit more about this field of expertise. You may or may not know, but I'm involved in international remote baggage screening, which is now United,
Yeah.
American Airlines, and the others that are doing that. And we see on a day-to-day basis the problems you're describing. So actually, there's a need in the market to do this, and especially because the older generation of maintenance peoples, the kings that I just described, they will be dinosaurs, and they will leave the industry. And then what? How are we going to do it? And I don't rely too much on the OEMs. They cannot oversee everything. So I totally hear you. But I can also understand if there's some kind of resistance in what you're trying to achieve, maybe from the same king, but also maybe the additional cost factor, and they don't see the cost savings immediately.
What are you hearing in response when you're proposing this? I'm interested to hear what can they possibly throw up in terms of this isn't going to be useful for us.
So I think we've seen a couple of things. There are two main reasons so far that people on the operator side, the technology owner side, have decided to work with us. The first is they really care about compliance and risk mitigation on tests, calibration of equipment, and making sure that the equipment is being kept to some standard in use on a day-to-day basis, right?
And by the way, I'm surprised by, in some cases, how old the equipment is. It's fascinating, and we don't have to describe it, but I think renewing stuff is also important, and keep things up to date. That's also important.
But I would prefer to have an old piece of equipment that's actually plugged in and working than a new piece of equipment that's actually not on or working, right? And that's but that's where I come down to, like, the compliance minded, right? We're working with one customer right now who's super focused on tests, calibration, compliance of equipment, and eliminating breaches. Because what happens if a bunch of people go through your checkpoint and you realize, oh, goodness, that walk-through metal detector wasn't plugged in or wasn't on? You have to dump the terminal. So people don't want to do that, right? They if they're focused on compliance, that really is part of their regs. They want to ensure that there's not going to be a breach, that all of the systems that are plugged in and in use are working and functioning properly, and that any system that's been taken out of operation and returned to service has been tested again. Okay?
Are we talking about equipment that's only in the security environment, or are we also talking about equipment which is more in the public domain, if you wish, but which is vulnerable for updating firmware or whatever?
Yeah, because I have grown up in the aviation security realm, that's where we've started, but we have had many a request from airports and others to focus on other types of assets. And so we are starting to do that, and that is very much in sight. But so far, we've really focused on the aviation security equipment more than anything else.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I also find it funny when there is a sort of a remote for staff that goes to a different location and they need to go through it, and it's completely outdated. We don't even know if it's working, even on very sophisticated airports. It's hilarious sometimes. What do you need to do to get this layer working? Because they cannot shut it down. You cannot rip out existing systems. And we are seeking no disruption situations. So how does that work when Curie Technologies comes in?
We have these little tags, and I'll tell you in a minute why they're important. But basically, we take the full list of assets, we put them into our software, and then we go on site and we tag all of the equipment with these little tags, and we link the tag to the asset in our software. And that software record, so our tag is kind of the universal ID, we call it, for equipment, right? So our little tag and the little number on it in our software then links all the other disparate systems that have information on that asset. So it has the serial number of the asset from the manufacturer. It has any identifier that's in the airport's asset management system. It has any identifier that potentially is in the OEM CMMS system that's different from the serial number. So it tries to make sure that it's linking all of those different data sets through this little universal ID. Again, going back to the system of record, right? And so that's the idea. The complex piece of this is not onboarding all of the equipment and tagging all of the equipment. It's really mapping all of those different workflows I was talking about. So if you have 6 different pieces of equipment and internal to the airport, there's 6 different flows in terms of how something gets ticketed. You need to map all of that, and you need to make sure that it's automated and configured in Curie across those different CMS systems. And then the third piece of that is we do API integrations with the relevant softwares that are in use either internally or by the external vendors if they are open to some sort of an integration. Some of them we've already integrated with.
Is Curie Technologies, are you working in other industries, or are you looking at other industries to help, find parallels and where things can be automated further?
Yeah, so I think that we're going to stay in security for now. We're working in kind of urban security environments. Obviously, ports and borders is an area of interest. But given we have worked very closely with a lot of the OEMs in the security detection space, we're kind of staying there for now. As I mentioned to Marlon, like in aviation and an airport, we're also very interested in all of the tangential technologies that are in the airport operating domain that also have this unique problem set, which is there's a lot of frontline activities that occur related to the equipment. And then there are external service providers who generally come in and service the equipment. So if a equipment in an airport has those 2 factors, it's very relevant to what we're doing.
So it could really be an end-to-end solution, including all the sortation equipment, passenger boarding bridges, whatever it is that they need to see operational data.
Interesting, passenger boarding bridges and everything around it. I love that.
We've had that request from a couple of airports, actually. Yeah.
I would like to talk a little bit about baggage. As you know, the BagFather is related to baggage predominantly, and you have some experience with that. In my opinion, real-time visibility becomes the baseline expectation also in baggage. How do you see that?
So, couple things. Right now, EDS systems that are in whole baggage screening in a lot of environments are not networked in a way that the OEMs can get to them.
And for our listeners, EDS stands for explosive detection systems.
They're
right? The thing that we don't want to talk about.
Exactly. They're those big, heavy systems that are screening all the bags, actually preventing explosions. Let's start there. Yeah. So they're not networked. And a lot of the data that's on those systems is proprietary to the OEMs, or the OEMs are the ones who kind of know how to sort through that. And so, as I was talking about earlier, I think that there's a great opportunity for the OEMs to network those systems on their side, pull the data, and deliver the right analytics through common infrastructure so that the airport has a view in that system of record of availability in real time of the systems, and also the status of all the tickets on those systems, if there are issues that need to be handled, et cetera. So that, to your point about real time, Marlon, both parties are seeing everything in real time, pulled from their systems in real time, right? Because again, you could say everything's real time is important, but we often just talk about one party having everything in real time. What about in this like multi-stakeholder world, right?
I'm curious as to hear what you think is coming next beyond what Curie is doing today. What adds more value down the line?
We have a lot of great things in store over the next 6 months, the rest of this year, in terms of airport implementations and learning from the front line. You would be amazed when you go hang out in a checkpoint or whole baggage room, the things you hear from the officers in terms of, oh yeah, this system always has these issues, or that one's going down these times, or you really get a lot of fantastic feedback. So I'm excited about that being kind of out in the community. The other piece, like I mentioned, we are working to kind of build really the model of CMMS connectivity with multiple vendors and that analytics delivery capability with multiple vendors to showcase in one airport in the United States what this common infrastructure approach could look like. And I think for us, that's really, really important, because the goal is to give the OEMs who participate in that a huge amount of comfort that we really are this neutral intermediary, and we're not trying to make money off of service delivery. We're not trying to make money off of the analytics. We're trying to make money off of creating the infrastructure system of record and arming the frontline workforce. So I think that sandbox, for lack of a better term, is really important to us this year. And I think around the September, October timeframe, that's going to be complete. And we're going to be able to, together with those OEM partners, really talk about it in an impactful way.
It's a fascinating journey you're on, Anne-Marie, and I'm very, very pleased that we had a chance to talk to you. What you're doing is pioneering in a field which is still greenfield. I saw a Dutch company recently being very much involved in cybersecurity and baggage handling systems, and they have given me examples that blew me away. That we are still looking at it like this, so it should be a priority for. All the boardroom people in their ivory towers listening to the BagFather.
You and your ivory towers, gosh, yes.
Jen, so Anne-Marie, thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
having me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate the time.
Anne-Marie, that was really a sharp look at the part of the industry that everyone relies on, but very few people truly understand. What stands out is that it isn't about adding more technology for the sake of technology. It's about making what already exists actually work together in real time in a way that supports the people running the operations. Because when baggage works, everything feels smoother. When it doesn't, everyone notices. Thanks for joining us on the BagFather, Anne-Marie. We look forward to talking to you more soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. Take care.